to Diaspora Rhythms Perspectives. I'm D.E. Simmons, I'll be your host, and today we'll be exploring the wonderful world of mixed media. The artist that we'll be interviewing today is Candace Hunter. In preparing for this interview, I was wondering, how do I describe her? And realized she's indescribable. Her work and her creativity, how she blends materials into what I guess are stories. She's a great storyteller. And when you look at her work, you can see the intimacy of the figures contained within. So let's get into it and explore the wonderful creativity of Candace Hunter. Candace, thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us to share your creativity. One of the things that I've always been impressed with about you is, to me, you are the very definition of authenticity.
Thank you.
In that I get the same person every time I see you, warm, captivating, inviting, and inspiring. And I see that in your work. The messages sometimes are not subtle, because neither are you. They do an oops upside the head kind of thing. The piece that I bought that's in my collection, the Florida inmates, and how you drew the figurative profile and then implanted all the individuals and the number of brothers that were on death row in Florida. And it's like you have a level of intimacy in everything that you create. So in looking at the medium that you work through, I have a dual question. Is like, how did you become this type of an artist? And then how is it that you approach your work in terms of selecting what pieces work together that mix well together for you to tell your story?
Well, my being a collagist is actually very self-serving. I had, at the time, the lovely Nicole Smith was still alive and thriving in her gallery. The Nicole Gallery was thriving. And I had known her as a viewer in the gallery, and I was always kind of shy about telling her I'm an artist and would you look at my work? And finally, I got up the nerve and she says, oh, okay. And so, after several, attempts at, I would love for you to do a studio visit, I'd love for you to come see the show, she finally made a studio visit to the Coach House.
Okay. And
I was painting at the time, but I had one collage there that was very personal to me, and it's my Goya and me and mine, oh my. Mm-hmm. And it's part of my private and personal collection. I will never sell it. And she looked at it and she says, oh, my dear, tell me about this piece. So I told her the story, and she says, oh, darling, you are a collagist, and I know collage. So if you continue making collage, I might show you. Baby, that's all I needed to hear. I said, okay, I'm gonna make some collage.
There you go. Yes, ma'am.
And I think from that moment, things turned on what media I would use to still tell the same things. Mm-hmm. And I'm blessed to have a particular kind of eye that can see shape and see pattern and see color in other disparate images and how they kind of come together to create a story. So, because as Romare Bearden says, it's just chaos at first. All collage is chaos. And so you got all these disparate things, but I have an eye, and I take no credit for that. I don't know how I have this eye that can see certain things and how they sit together and sit on top of one another and start to tell a story. So sometimes the papers tell the story. Sometimes I know what the story should be and it changes along the way. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I'm very specific and what the story is going to be. So it could be any of those things.
So when you look, as I look around your studio, you get a really good perspective. But I want to know from you, what is it saying? What is your art saying to us?
You would have to tell me what it's saying to you. I can't tell you that. That's not my.
Is that not how it works?
That is not my position. And I know that there are a lot of artists who are going to go, oh, it's this, this, this.
Mm-hmm.
And because I started in theater first,
Mm-hmm.
I understand that the writer writes this piece, this jewel. But as a play, it's not done until that writer hands it off to a director.
Okay.
And then a director sees something and crafts something with actors and lighting designers and set designers, and then presents to an audience this author's words.
Right.
And it's not until you have an audience
Does it
that
come together?
sees what it is that it makes it a play. So I've always believed in the authority of the audience. So it's up to you and who's ever looking at it to make the final sense of it. And does it tell them a story? Does it impact them?
Okay. Then I've noticed a trend of late where people are submitting wonderful work, but it's untitled. What's that story? Because maybe it's just me, but I need a little help. Like, I get it, but what were you thinking when you did this, so that I know? Because it could be totally misaligned.
So sometimes it's really because you're moving really fast.
Okay.
As an artist, you're really moving fast and you're moving on to the next thing, and you didn't have time to title it.
Okay.
Rarely is it intentional that it is untitled. It's usually because you don't have enough time. So I learned this in my museuming and art history a long time ago, that often there are other people who title work, not the artist.
Mm.
So there's a Brancusi piece at the Art Institute that has, I think it's the Negress. Well, Brancusi didn't title it that. Someone selling it did.
Okay.
So that it made sense to the next to the audience looking at it.
So they became like the director and the choreo. Okay, all right.
So sometimes you just run out of time.
All right.
And
So
as I
then-
told you, sometimes I forget to sign the word. I have two people who say to me after something, "Did you sign it?" And I go, "Yeah." Oh, no, I didn't. Okay. And then I have to go back and sign it.
So then it feels like you're getting a lot of messages that come in that you've got to filter to be able to start to create.
So I don't know if it's a lot of messages, because that sounds kind of...
Chaotic.
Yes.
Okay, because collaging is chaotic, all right? So maybe a singular message comes in,
So, yeah, ideas come.
like dust in their veins.
Again, self-serving.
Okay.
Self-serving. Really, seriously, I'm an artist who looks for opportunities on a schedule. So Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I go online and I go to 3 different sources and I look for possibilities of work. So juried shows, solo shows that are looking. I then go to see if it makes sense to me,
Mm-hmm.
what the jury fee is, if there's a fee,
Okay.
because jury fees are going higher and higher, like artists are getting more and more money, and that's not the truth. Who are the jurors? So if there are no jurors listed and it says it's a jury fee and they're asking money from me, then I don't apply. I just don't. I said, if you're saying it's jury, then you need the money to pay the jurors, and you can't tell me who they are, I'm out. If the jurors are listed, I then do a little research on who they are to see if there's someone or some ones who have any interest in my interest. So if I see a lead juror who is a watercolorist who does beautiful lilies of the valley, I'm not going to apply.
Okay.
Because I think my work is very pretty,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not that kind of pretty.
Okay.
And so I'm not going to waste my money on that. So one day I saw a posting for a show at the University of Minnesota, and it was called Women and Water Rights, Rivers of Regeneration. Loved, loved, loved the title. It sounded poetic.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, well, what is this?
Okay.
And I knew nothing about the title, Women and Water Rights. What are water rights?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what does this mean? And then I read a little further, and the lead juror was a woman by the name of Lucy Lepard. Lucy Lepard is my personal art shero.
Okay.
When I was in school, I used Jansen's History of Art as the tome, and I think probably 90% of art students in the nation used Jansen's book then. At that time, and I'm giving away my age, there was one woman, Mary Cassell, and one African American, Romare Bearden, and I think there were about 2 sentences for both. So out of this book that was this thick, one woman, one black man. Yeah, so women were not included in the annals of art history. So I'm just like, I'm sitting at a women's college with all these women, and I'm just like, why aren't we there? This is making no sense to me. So women did women art. So those were the domestic art. So that's sewing, needlework,
The crafts.
the crafts. And I said, well, this is crazy. So Lucy was one of those people, one of those very astute people who said, this is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And she started writing, and she became the first female art critic for the New York Times. She was the curator for Judy Chicago's The Dinner Party, which skyrocketed them both to the art stratospheres. She's written, I think, over 80 books, cited in probably 800 publications, a powerhouse who changed women in the art world. Now, I didn't say black women. I just said women.
Women.
Okay, so I just had to throw that. But still,
It counts.
it counts.
And
And
it
it
matters.
counts mightily.
Yes.
So I was just like, well, I got to submit something for this show. So this woman who's no longer young, who my work might be in front of her eyes before she goes on to her next Valhalla. So I started looking at what are water rights. I didn't know. I didn't understand it because I live on Lake Michigan. We are extremely water wealthy here in Chicago. People don't know anything about not being able to drink out of a water fountain, you can brush your teeth, you can shower, you can stay in the shower as long as you want to, you can take a bath every day of the week. You can do these things because we have water available to us. We can drink from our fountains, from our tap, perfectly good water. So I was just like, well, what is this? So I started looking up water rights, and there had been 2 important international meetings about water rights. And one was held in Buenos Aires, the other one was in Paris. And I got the notes for these meetings, and they were tomes. It was a lot of reading. So I'm scouring this, and I'm trying to make sense of what this is, and trying to make,
Mm-hmm.
And finally, after all of that and all of the other reading that I could do on the subject, I realized that the woman who is most affected by the lack of clean water is a woman who looks similar to me. She is always a woman of melanin. Those who lack clean water primarily were in sub-Saharan Africa, Central America, and India. Brown, and black women. And I said, well, they're for the grace of God. And so I said, I need to know more. I need to do more. I need to make some sense of this. I need to have other people see what I see. Because I've been talking to Chicagoans. They're like, wait, what are you talking about? Water? No. So I started having teas over at the Coach House, and I invited astute women over. Some were grad students, some were artists, some were academicians. And we started having that conversation about women and water rights and what they knew. And I was trying to fashion what this possible work could look like. Mm-hmm. Now, at the time, I'm still thinking about the show in Minnesota, right. But it grew so much bigger than creating a piece for a group show at a university. And so I did submit something. I was not accepted. And that's okay, because it was not my full thought. Mm-hmm. And so I eventually came up with the idea of creating headless, legless torsos for the show that told these women's story, the myriad of their stories. And headless and legless because the women who are most affected, their voice is not being heard. And legless because they cannot remove themselves from their own situation. They can't get up and walk away from it. They are where they are. And so eventually it became 42 torsos that are about 3 feet tall, I think 20 inches wide, that move across a wall to a well and move away from the well. And I said, this I have to do. I really do. So I did a Kickstarter, and a successful Kickstarter. Thank you to everyone who donated. And we had a brilliant show. Yeah. And then the show took on its own life.
Put you on the map.
It did. Okay. It did. Didn't get to meet Lucy, but you know.
But hey, I'm sure she knows about it.
Well, she does, but that's a side story. We'll tell you about that later. Yeah.
Right. And so, like, I wonder, with the way things are in the world, we hear this so often, that things have changed in the social political. But you went and you took something that you didn't know about, researched it, and then brought it back and told a story that even the originators of the concept weren't telling. And I think that's the brilliance of your work. We look at the impact of Trayvon, and all of a sudden this innocuous piece of clothing took on so much of a deeper meaning. And you took that and did the same thing what you did with Dust in Their Veins with your next foray out, which you called the Hood of Truths. Very powerful.
Thank you. So it was after Trayvon's death that it hurt. As it hurt.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the situation and the volatility of it all. And I was remembering that as a child of the neighborhood that I just had a brain snap that Emmett Till grew up in. I went to kindergarten where the school was that Emmett Till went to, which was McCosh Elementary, and in Woodlawn. I lived 3 blocks from there. And so I was born the fall after the summer that he was brutally, heinously murdered. And so I grew up in the shadow of the understanding that a little black boy could be taken off the earth and murdered, but a strong black mother could stand up for him and say, no, somebody gonna pay for this. And so I grew up in that. And when Trayvon died, I hadn't seen that kind of outrage internationally over the death of a black boy since Emmett. So Trayvon replaced Emmett as that person that stood for all of the black boys who deserve a life.
Because it's still going on.
Right, absolutely. Because it didn't stop after Emmett, and it didn't stop after Trayvon, as we well know. And so I was just like, so Emmett's story was still shrouded, hidden. The stories of us from First Footfall in the New World, some of those stories were still hidden. And I kept thinking of the hoodie that Trayvon wore. And I want to back up a little bit. When he was killed, a lot of artists immediately started doing images of Trayvon. And as a woman, as a mother, all I could think was, I don't want to walk up on somebody with my baby on their chest. I don't want to be in the grocery store and see my baby on your back. I don't want to see my murdered child every time I turn around. So as an artist, I could never use the visage of Trayvon. I think that's cruel to a mother. I really do. But that's just me. But the hood took on a universal meaning. And so for that entire show, I used an empty hoodie, that chasm, as a lens in which to look at hooded truths in this here United States of America. So I did a hood around Malcolm. I did a hood around Martin. I did a hood around Mr. Stepney. I did a hood around Edgar. Help me. Medgar Evers. The two worked together like that. I put hoods in place like your piece that black men on death row in different states. I did a hood around the room that a Sally Hemings type person would have resided in, because I had to talk about what was done to black women who were enslaved. So I looked at a lot of our sometimes unspoken truths, our hidden truths, our hooded truths, and created that show. And so again, it was one of those things where I said, I received an idea that this is what I need to do, and so I did it.
This line of creativity speaks to our community in volumes.
I hope so.
Okay? And I hope you're getting that love.
Thank you.
From the community. But as an artist, I wonder, how then do you navigate your career and the art world when we still have some boundaries to cross? How about that? Okay.
So I'm still an outsider to the greater art world. And I've never understood how one enters there.
Okay.
I don't know the open sesame phrase to use to enter that world. All I know is that I have to keep making. I have to keep listening to whatever comes to me. And I have to keep telling my truths through my art. And hopefully it's seen and taken in by the right spirits, souls, minds, hearts, eyes. And that, I told you before, I have no control over that part of it. So I try to manage my career. Doing the search 3 times a week, I try to do things logically. But the bottom line is, at some point, you're picked, you're plucked, and you're placed.
Mm.
And that's someone outside of yourself. It's called the 3 Ps.
Well, you know, it's pretty well established that the larger community kind of picks and chooses who they deem, okay, the current flavor of the month, I believe you referred to earlier. But I wonder, in retrospect, looking at being a Chicago artist, how does that play a part in your creativity as opposed to being in Atlanta or someplace else? Because I think that there's something very unique about the Chicago artist community.
So I think there's something very unique about Chicago, about being a Chicagoan. We really are the city of big shoulders, no matter what industry you're in here. So like if you're an actor and you go to LA and you sit in an audition, directors, they go, oh, you're from Chicago, you know how to work. They don't question it that you don't come with a skill set and with a level of maturity with your work. You go to New York, the same thing happens. Oh, you're a Chicago actor. They know that you've been putting in the work.
Mm-hmm.
So in the acting field, both sides of the coast know that. As an artist, we put in the work, but I don't know that the same response happens on the other 2 coasts from being in Chicago.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know that that happens.
Well, maybe I can share a little light.
Okay, please, help me.
A few years ago, we hosted a group of LA artists, Diasporal Rhythms did, and we had a reception for them at a couple of other collectors' homes. And they were so taken aback by the sense of community, the level of support that our Chicago artists were getting. And they hadn't seen anything like that. And they said, we wish we had this, or how could we recreate this back home? And you know, we as an organization have traveled and looked for artists all around the country, but I would venture to say that Chicago artists are known just like the Chicago actors are known. You guys put in the work.
Yeah, put in the work.
Because when I see the work that our artists are doing compared to people outside of this arena, I don't see any differentiation. In fact, I think a lot of their work is better. I may be biased. Okay,
You are.
I am a little.
In a loving way.
Okay, but I'm like saying it's just as good, and then I look at the price point, and I said, well, our artists are not getting the value of their work in comparison to some other people on the coast and maybe coming out of the continent. So I believe you guys are right up there, and I think that that's one of the advocacy things that Diasporal Rhythms is trying to do and has done and hopefully continues to do, and people feel that, is to expose people to these wonderful artists, to allow them to have the experience of how do you live with original art through going through our home tours. And then if you like what you see and you want some of it, then to provide a space, an auction where you can come and get some of that or buy it directly from the artists themselves. So with that being said, when you look at what Diasporal Rhythms has been doing in the community, how do you feel that they have, or that they are addressing the issues that maybe our art is not as accepted outside of our area?
So I'm going to say 2 things about Diasporal Rhythms and how I know you impact the lives of others. I was going from someplace on 43rd trying to cut through to get home.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw a group of children, teenagers, out on a green space with easels and working in the great out of doors with clearly one adult who was standing there and working with them. And I thought, yes, in high school, I didn't get to go and be outside in the green and paint and be able to look at my comrades' work and have someone speak to me about the work. And it filled me with such joy to see these young Black boys and girls outside painting. I was just like, yes. And then I said something later to one of the members, and that member said, oh yeah, that's our high school. I said, wait, what? What? Your high school? Yes, we have partnered with Kenwood High School. And we work with the art teacher and the art students. And I went, now, that's brilliant. That is brilliant. So that's number one. So that was something totally outside of me. It had nothing to do with ego. Mm-hmm. It was me seeing Black boys and girls learning how to paint in the great outdoors, which is where one should learn to paint.
Yeah.
With that light and air, fresh air around you. The other one is that Diasporal Rhythms honored me in 2014 as one of their awardees that year. And I proudly have it on my CV that the men and women who are the collectors of Diasporal Rhythms saw something special in what I produce, that they wanted to honor me with a group of other artists who are just phenomenal human beings and phenomenal artists. So forever and always, DR will be a part of my life story.
Thank you for that, Candace. It's nice to hear that people see what we do in the community, and it's a good positive reflection, because it's about being in a position to challenge some of the barriers and perceptions that our art is not fine art. Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, and when we have these exhibitions at museums and and places where ordinarily they would not have accepted us, we've been able to get in. But there are still challenges ahead, and because of the wonderful journey that you were on as an artist, I have two questions. The first one is, what are you working on now? And my last question is, for those coming behind you, what is it that you need to tell them that they ordinarily wouldn't even ask or know?
Okay, whoa. Whoa. All right, so question one, what am I working on now? I'm working on a series called Black Men, White Shirts. Mm. And one of the larger pieces is behind you. And its subtitle is Grieving. And it's a story that takes place on the banks of the PD River in Chirrell, South Carolina, Chesterfield County, of two men, an older man and a younger man, who didn't necessarily know one another until the day of a funeral. Mm. And so I wrote a whole piece of prose that goes with it, which I think is quite lovely. That I usually, when this piece has been shown, I have the story hanging, and I will have the story at the Museum of Science and Industry for Black Creativity as well, that will go with the piece, because I think it's important. But this was the first one that was done from the series. Over Your Shoulder is another one, that is number 4. There are 3 pieces right now at the Little Black Pearls Black Gallery at 47th and Greenwood. There's another one that will be larger than this one, that is called Death and the King's Horseman. No, not Morway Shoyinka's play, but talking about the death of a Black American king called John Lewis. Mm. So it is a many-layered collage portrait of the gentleman, the elegant gentleman who crossed the Pettus Bridge with John Lewis's body. and the two horsemen who accompanied them across the bridge. And it's very early in the stages of doing, because it's a big piece. So still working through this series. And it really happened because for 2.5 years I did the Brown Limbed Girls, which were these, so I think you can see some of them over my head, these girls that were full of joy and whimsy and mirth and sunshine and happiness and sisterhood and all of those things, because I started it when we all sat in shut down.
Right.
Shut out. Kept away from. Didn't know what was going to happen. COVID.
We lived blocks from each other. We couldn't even come by.
Couldn't see you. Couldn't, like, So I wanted to do things that were cheery. And so over the time since the first day of shelter in place is when I started them, they took on a life of their own. They became billboards for the city, for the COVID awareness program. They got me a gallery.
You never stopped to think why?
No, because I was given an assignment to do and I did.
Okay.
See, when you're asked to do something and you do it, your mama would have told you that. Just do it. And then everything will work out.
Well,
so I did it. And
for me, it's like you don't see enough images of us joyful.
Right. We don't. And I had to right then.
Right,
I had to have us laughing and skipping and stuff.
Yes.
So near the end of it, and I've done nearly 100 of them. I'm not counting. It might be like 88, but that's nearly 100.
That's a lot of joy.
And then I said, oh, but I need to give my brothers some time as well. And so that became the start of the Black Men White Shirts. Because as a child, I thought there was nothing better looking than a black man in a crisp white shirt. This is like, oh, that's pretty.
Okay.
That's just pretty. And so I wanted to have many of us, or many of you,
and show the brothers with some joy.
With some joy and with some dignity.
And some intimacy.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
Of us caring for one another. Because they don't see that either.
So
it's so important for us to be seen.
So that series has started. I don't know where it will take me. Sometimes when I've had the thought for a series, I knew the whole capsule. Okay. This is growing. I don't know where it's going to end up. But I do know what's going to happen this time next year.
And what's that for you?
I will have a solo show in the larger gallery at the Hyde Park Art Center, the Cantor Gallery. And it is called The Alien Nations and Sovereign States of Octavia E. Butler.
Okay. So, then this will be part 1. And we'll come back and that'll be part 2.
And we'll talk about that another time.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. But what about the artists that are coming behind you? What is it that you need them to know that they might not know to ask or might not run into until it's too late?
That I really cannot answer that, Dee, because everyone is on their own path and learns at their own pace.
Okay, then let me give you an example.
No, but I will say this.
Okay.
It is important to constantly being in a place of learning. Don't think because you have an innate talent that that's it. You don't have to go and get an MFA, but if you want to be an art star, you better. I'm just saying. But you don't have to do that. But what you have to do is to continue to learn. You have to learn techniques. You have to learn from others. You have to learn from visiting museums and galleries. You have to learn from talking to other artists and other people. Not just artists, because artists can be a funny lot. You need to talk to thinkers. You need to figure out how much of that you can pull into what you're doing. but you must always be learning. I'm a child of an educator, and I do believe that we all have to learn every single day. And it may not be a technique. It may be a political action that is happening in Accra. It might be the water situation in Flint and trying to figure out why it really happened. It might be being a voracious reader or a voracious talker with others, like-minded and not. Because you can't learn from yourself. So if you're just with people who are like you, you're not learning anything. So that is my answer.
I knew you could do it.
That we all have to be in a perpetual state of learning.
Yeah.
Investigating, learning.
And if I may add to that, learn from the collectors, because you want to keep them collecting your work. All right? Just a little note. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed our afternoon together. Thank you for taking the time.
No,
and
thank
I look
you.
forward to more wonderful creative work from you.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Doug. Okay.